A few years ago, I was telling my children there was something I needed them to do. I don't know if I even remember exactly what I was telling them or what the context was, but one of them was feeling a little like strong that particular day and looks at me and goes, "Dad, you're not the boss of me." And I know, and that's what you're like you think that's your reaction. Imagine what's going on in my head. And there's like this part of me going, I'm fixing to lose everything. I'm going to lose my temper. I'm going to lose my child because they're going to be gone, right? And then I'm going to lose my freedom because, they're gone. And then everything's going to get lost and Emily's going to have to raise the other two alone. And it just like in my head, like instantly all that went through there as my child looks at me and says, "You're not the boss of me." And right before I was about to lose it, and listen, I'm a parent. I try not to lose it, but I do lose it, and my kids are here, so I got to be honest. And right before I was about to, God just like reached down from heaven into my head and pulled up this memory that I had of me at that almost exact same age. I don't know exactly what age it was, but very similar. I was in junior high, and my mom said, "Stephen, this room that you're living in is not fit for a human to live in," right? Some of you have had that conversation with your junior high children, right? And so she looks at me and goes, "Look, you got to clean this up, and a couple of things I need you to do. Two of the things that you must do, Stephen, is make your bed and take your clean laundry off the floor and stop just leaving it there and digging through it and putting stuff on," right? That's just not acceptable. Like, I don't know why, but it wasn't. And so my mom said, "If you don't do this, Stephen, there's going to be consequences." And she laid out the consequences, and they were clear and they were significant. And that's all that she's. Now, I think my mom is very unreasonable. I don't know why I need to make my bed. I don't know why I couldn't leave my clean laundry on the floor, but I really do know now. But I didn't at the time, right? And I remember being really upset with my mom and like making me do this and put my clean laundry away and make my bed, and how mad, what kind of mom do I have? And so I came up with this brilliant plan. I made my bed. And I mean, I made it like you could have taken a picture of it and used it as an example of what a made bed should look like. I mean, the corners were perfect. Everything was smooth. It was great. The pillows were arranged perfectly. I made my bed, and then I picked up all my clean laundry off the floor, and I put it on my bed. Right? I put all my clean laundry on the floor, and for a year, I slept on the floor. My clean laundry was on my made bed. Okay, this is what I did in 7th grade going into 8th grade. I'm not proud of it, but that's how hard-headed I am, and that's how much I don't like people telling me what to do. And here's what I thought in my mind, right? I'm winning. Okay, now I'm sleeping on a floor, but in my mind, I'm winning because I sort of found the workaround for the rule. I didn't have to actually put my laundry away. It just wasn't on the floor, so I would do my laundry, dump it on my bed, pick out what I wanted, and like wrinkles, who cares about that kind of stuff? That's why I wouldn't have a girlfriend until the end of high school. Might have something to do with it. But you know what? I remember just how much, and I know I'm not the only one, because a lot of us, we don't really like authority, do we? We don't like people telling us what to do, unless the people telling us what to do are telling us what we want to do anyway to begin with. And otherwise we go, "Who are you to tell me what to do?" Like, who are you to tell me to make laws that tell me what to do? Who are you as a boss to tell me what to do, or as a parent, or as a teacher? And many of us have been through that, where we sort of struggle with this idea of authority. We struggle with the idea of someone else who's telling us what to do. And it's hard when we like the person or when we trust the person. Like, even if I like you, it's hard for me to have someone tell me what to do. But if I don't like the person, or if I don't like the rules that they're making, or if I don't trust them, or if I don't believe that they have my best interests in mind, or if I don't like even just the way that they think, if they think differently than me, then I'm the guy who's going to say, "Yeah, I don't have to listen to you. Why do I need to listen to you? Why is it that I have to?" I mean, okay, maybe if you're my boss and I'm going to get fired, I'll listen to you, but just what I have to, not anymore. Like, I'm not going to give you any, like, I'm just going to do what I have to do. Or I listen to someone in government who, like, makes a rule. I go, "That's just the craziest rule I've ever heard. Why are you doing that? I shouldn't have to do that. I don't have to listen to you." And that's sort of the way I am. And I know not everyone's that way, but I know you, because a lot of you are Texans, and that's sort of inbred into us, right? I mean, we're the burn it down and rebuild. We're the secede state. Like, don't raise your hands, but how many of you would vote to secede right now if you could, right? Because we don't need anyone. We're on our own. We're doing it our way. I don't need you, because I definitely don't want you telling me what to do. And this morning, as we are continuing to work through 1 Peter, And this book that was written by Peter and in a really difficult time in the history of the church, and what we see and what we've seen and will continue to see is how much God really did change Peter's life, because Peter was a guy who didn't like people telling him what to do, did he? I mean, you look at him in the Gospels and Jesus would say something and Peter would go, I'm not doing that. Jesus would say, here's what you're going to do. I'm not going to do that. And Peter was the guy who's like, don't tell me what to do. I'm going to do it my way. You're wrong. I'm in control. I'm the most important one. And that's who Peter was. But God transformed his life. And what we're going to see here today as we look at 1 Peter is a really important truth that a lot of us are going to struggle with. So I hope you'll love me when we're done. But what we're going to see is how I respond to earthly authority reflects how I respond to God's authority. Like some of y'all are going like, I don't know if I want to be here today. Can I get out? Is it like maybe make a distraction, honey, so I can leave or something? But the truth is, and we're going to see, and I think Peter's going to make a really important, teach us an important truth, that how I respond to this earthly authority, and we all have earthly authorities over us, don't we? And how we respond to it reflects, is going to show, is going to determine a lot about how I respond to God's authority in my life. So let's look in 1 Peter chapter 2. I'm going to begin in verse 13, and here's what it says. It says, be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. And now for us to really understand these verses, we got to understand who Peter is actually talking about, because the emperor, when Peter is talking, is this guy named Nero. And Nero was a bad guy. And there's very little redeeming about him. There's very little good about who Nero was. Nero was the guy who loved to punish people and loved to torture people. Not just punish people, but to torture people. And even not just to torture them for when they did wrong, but if he just disagreed with you, he would find ways to torture you and make your life physically painful beyond anything that probably any of us have ever gone through in our life. And so here's this guy who loved to torture people, and here's this guy who loved to take advantage of people and work people really hard. And some historians have said he tripled the number of slaves in the Roman Empire in his time just because he wanted to take advantage of people. And so he did all that he could to get cheap and free labor. And he was just a cruel guy at that. He was a guy who celebrated what we would call evil. I mean, here's this guy who would celebrate things that we would call like seeing people suffer and celebrate torture and all kinds of other stuff I don't even feel comfortable talking about in this room here. And he would celebrate those kind of things. And so here Peter is saying, guess what? I need you to submit, subject, to follow the authority of the emperor. And it's not just like some general emperor out there. When he was writing this, everyone's going, Nero? Like that's the first thing, right? Nero, he was the one in power, and not only was he in power, but all the governors that he's talking about, all the people that Nero appointed over different regions and different areas, guess what? They were just as evil as he was, because Nero was the king, the Lord, who celebrated evil, the emperor who celebrated evil, and he put in people who like to do evil, and he rewarded evil. And so can you imagine you're a Christian at this time, and you're excited because Peter wrote this letter to you and to the churches in this region, and they're celebrating. He's like, and he starts, things are going well, and you get to this chapter, and he's like, wait a minute, time out, Peter. You're telling me that you want me to submit to Nero and the governors that he appointed. You can see him saying, wait, time out. Why would you do this? Don't you understand what he's done and what he's doing and how we're suffering? In fact, he starts off 1 Peter by talking about all the suffering that they're going through because of this one emperor, and now he's saying this, and it would make sense if they were people who praised good and punished evil, but these people that you're talking about, Peter, are people who praised evil and punished the good. Why would you want us to submit to them? And I think verse 15 is the key. I want to just highlight it. It says, listen, And man, don't skip over this, because I hear a lot of people ask me, hey, how do I know what God's will is? Well, sometimes the Bible tells us, for this is the will of God, right? I mean, he's saying right here, this is God's will for your life, that by doing so, that by submitting to these leaders, by submitting to those in authority, that by doing good, you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. What I think that Peter is telling us here is that there's something bigger that he wants us to do with our lives than just have the right people in authority. You see, I don't think he's telling us that we always have to do what those in authority say. In fact, we'll get to some times where he tells us we don't. I don't think he's saying that authority is always right. I don't think he's saying that if you do right, that those in authority will do right. But what I do think that Peter is saying here, and it's such an important thing in this verse here, but what he's saying is that if you do right, even when others do wrong, the world will see Jesus. Can I say that again? That if you do right, right, and right by meaning by what God wants, if you follow him and do things his way, even when others, even when people around you, even when this world, even when those in leadership do wrong, at the end, here's what the result of that's going to be, is that the world will see Jesus. And you know what Peter wanted more than anything else, is he wanted people to see Jesus. He wanted people to come to Jesus, because it doesn't matter if we have the perfect government, the perfect boss, the perfect teacher, the perfect parent. If people don't know Jesus, none of that really ultimately matters. And so what Peter is saying to us here is that we submit to a lower authority for a higher purpose. We submit. We as children of God get the opportunity to submit to a lower authority, something below our God, something below the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and we get to do that for a higher purpose. That we purposely choose to do this, not because those in authority are good or right or worthy. We do this because we trust God. We do this because we trust God and that he knows what he is doing. Listen, the Bible is clear that God put all authority in place, all of it. Like not just the ones that I like. Not just the ones that agree with me. Not just the ones that do what I want them to do. Not just the ones that I think are worthy or deserving or honored of it. No, he says, listen, God has put all authority in place, and he chose and he knows what he's doing. In fact, Paul says the same basic thing. He says, let everyone submit to the governing authorities, since there is no authority except from God. And the authorities that existed are instituted by God. So here's the challenge that we have. And I want you to think about government. And I want you to think about bosses that you've had. I want you to think about teachers. And I even want you to think about your parents. And I'll bet you that some of you can think of great examples of people in government. I actually have a friend. I went to college with him. We went to church together. James Langford. He's a senator from Oklahoma, and he is a godly man. And I think so highly of him and what he's trying to do in government. We text about once a month, and I'm so thankful for just knowing that there's someone like James in our government. And I wish there were more people like him in our government, right? This guy who tries to honor God, this guy who tries to do what's right. And you can think of that. Some of you can think of some bosses that you've had that are just like they're the perfect boss. I mean, they cared about you and they wanted the best for you, and they built you up and they invested in you, and they looked for, they were there for you. They were servant leaders. And some of you can think of that. Some of you have had some teachers who just poured out their hearts into you, right? I mean, they gave everything for you to help you become better, and they believed in you maybe when other people wouldn't. And you can think of those people, can't you? And I bet you can think of the flip side too. I bet you can think of people in government, you go, I hope they never get elected again. I know you're going through names. I want you to speak them because I know you are. And by the way, we got both sides in here, right? Because we got people who think that, you know what, you can think of that person in government and go like, why are they even there? God, why did you allow them to get to this position? You can think of a boss that you go, God, why in the world did they get promoted? I don't know what they're doing. They only care about themselves. They're not trying to help anyone else. They're selfish. They're taking advantage of you. And you can think of it, can't you? I know. I can see in your face. It's like, yeah, I know. You want a name, Stephen? I'll give it to you now. Some of you can think of teachers who didn't seem to care about you and just were doing whatever. And you go back and look, man, I hope I never have another teacher like that again. And you can think of that. You can think of both extremes. You can think of the best of the best and the worst of the worst. But here's what God teaches. Be careful thinking you know better than God. Be careful thinking that you and I know better who should be in the government and who should be a boss and who should be a teacher and who should be a parent. Be careful thinking that you and I know better than the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. God has something bigger for us than just, hey, I want the right person in charge. God has something bigger than your personal political party, than your personal likes, than your personal comfort. And I know that some of us have been deeply hurt by those in authority. And I'm not saying that God wanted that or likes that. In fact, one of the things that the balance of this passage that we have to talk about is that God says that those who are in authority are held to a higher standard. So don't think for a moment that those who are in authority, maybe they get everything that this world has to offer, but one day they're going to stand before Jesus, and those who did not use their authority to honor Him are going to answer to Him for that. So it's a big deal. But it also means that those of us who are under authority have to make a decision. Do I trust God? Do I trust Him? Do I trust Him that He knew what He was doing when He let that person get elected? Do I trust Him that He knew what He was doing when that person became my boss? Do I trust Him that He knew what He was doing when I got assigned to that class? Do I trust Him that He knows better? I don't submit to authority because they're worthy of it, because they deserve it, because they've earned it. I submit to authority because I trust God, because I trust Him that He knows what He's doing. But it doesn't end there, right? We submit to a lower authority for a higher purpose because we trust God, but also because our witness matters. Maybe that'll get there. Our highest goal as children of God should always be, how can I expand God's kingdom? Do my words, do my actions, do my attitudes make it easier or more difficult for people to come to Jesus? And more importantly, for me to tell people about Jesus. I want you to imagine and think of the person, the worst of the worst. Think of the worst person in government, or the worst boss, or the worst teacher, or maybe if you had a difficult parent relationship, think about the worst of the worst, and imagine if God gave you the opportunity one day to stand before them, right? And what's cool about even what Paul wrote is Paul's writing in the book of Romans. The reason he wrote the book of Romans, he's trying to raise money because he wants to get to Rome. And why does he want to get to Rome? Because he wants to stand before this emperor named Nero and tell him about Jesus. And Peter's sort of, I think that he doesn't have that same calling, but Peter's doing the same thing. And imagine if you got to stand before the worst politician, the worst boss, the worst teacher that you've ever had, and you had the opportunity to stand before them and say, can I just tell you something? Jesus loves you, and He died for you on the cross so that you could be forgiven and that you could have life for all of eternity. Can I tell you about Jesus? If you had that opportunity, would they say to you, yeah, that sounds good, but why don't you love me? Would they say to you, yeah, that sounds good, but I've seen what you posted on social media about me? Would they say, hey, that sounds good, but I've heard what you talked about with your friends in the hallway? Well, they say, hey, that sounds good, but I've seen your I've seen how you roll your eyes every time I say something. And I've seen your attitude. I see how you barely do any work, or you're barely in. You just sort of do what you have to do and just to get by. And I've seen that. So I'm not sure I can believe that you're Jesus, that you said change your life and can change mine. Why don't you let him change your life first? Is that what they would respond to us? Or would they say, I don't know if I get it. I don't even always know if I like you. But there's something different about you. You see, there's something that's so, man, I wish I would have gotten this as a younger man, and that's simply that I can be right, but if people don't see Jesus in me, I'm wrong. You hear me? I can be right about my politics, and I can be right about my boss, and I can be right about my teachers, and I can be right about my parents. I can be right about everything that I think and everything that I believe, and my stance and belief and everything that I do can be perfectly right. But if people don't see Jesus in me, I am wrong. Everything about me is wrong. I have missed the point of why Jesus put me here, because he didn't put me here so that I could have the perfect government, or the perfect boss, or the perfect teacher, or the perfect parent. He put me here to help people see Jesus. And I have to sometimes, some of us might have to decide, do we want the perfect boss, or do we want people to know Jesus? Some of us might have to decide, do we want the perfect government, or do we want people to see Jesus? Some of us might have to decide, do we want the perfect teacher, or do we want people to see Jesus? And if Jesus gives us the opportunity to tell even them, the imperfect ones, about him, would they see something in us that they even want? You see, it's not about me, and it's not about my wants. It's not about me wanting to be in charge and telling what the perfect thing is. It's about people seeing Jesus. And what Peter is challenging us to do is to say, do you trust God? That he knows what he's doing? And do people see Jesus in you? Do you have a witness that allows you to tell everyone, even the people that are different than you? And I was thinking about this. If I can't radically love someone, I mean like radically love someone who votes different than me, enough to tell them about Jesus, then I'm the problem, not them. If I can't radically love that boss that makes my life miserable and is just a jerk and has unrealistic expectations, if I can't radically love them, then I'm the problem, not them. Because God has said that, guess what? You and I have the opportunity to love and to tell and to proclaim the good news, and nothing else ultimately matters. And that's what Peter, actually, even as he continues on, what he's going to show us is that when we understand this, when we understand that you have this opportunity to trust God, and you have this opportunity to point people to Jesus, that is the freedom to live God's purpose in your life. That he created you for a purpose, and it's true freedom that you find. And let's keep reading in 1 Peter chapter 2. Verse 16 says this: live as people who are free. Doesn't it seem like he's contradicting himself for a moment there? Like, didn't he just told us to submit, to honor those in authority, and then which means to let someone have control, a little bit of power, to do what they're saying. I mean, that's what that means. And then he says, now live as people who are free. And I think if I'm free, no one's going to tell me what to do. I do whatever I want to do. He says, live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Honor everyone. Love the brotherhood. Fear God. Honor the emperor. And you could say here, honor Nero. That's what it's saying. And so what Peter is telling us he's not contradicting himself. He's telling us that freedom does not mean you do whatever you want to do. In fact, you know as well as I do that just doing whatever we want to do usually ends up messing up our life. You've seen in other people, right, where they do whatever, I'm just going to live my best life, and it ends up being addiction, or it ends up being debt, or it ends up in broken relationships, or it ends up in guilt and condemnation. And you've seen what happens when we just do whatever it is that we want to do and just care only about ourselves. It becomes selfish and ugly and broken. So freedom is not doing whatever you want to do. Freedom is doing what God created you to do. And you will never be more free than when you are living the life that God called you to. And so look at what he says. He says, honor everyone. Everyone is created in the image of God. Everyone has purpose. Everyone has value. So honor them. Love the brotherhood. Love each other because we're family. Fear God because it's all about God. And guess what? You can even honor the emperor. You know what he's telling us? He's saying, play your part. I was looking at our worship team, and we're so blessed with them. But imagine if Marty over here on the drums, at the first song, he goes, I'm not going to play that first song. I don't want to play what we scheduled. I'm going to play the second song first. And he just started drumming for the second. And then imagine if Sabrina over here, she just goes, I don't really like any of those songs. I'm just going to play something completely different. And then imagine if Greg goes, you know what, I'm just like, no, forget you. I'm going to play what I've written because that's what I was supposed to play. And he's playing. You got 3 different things playing. What's it going to sound like? It's not going to be good, is it? You're not going to enjoy it. And many of you probably wouldn't come back, especially if you're your first-time guest here. You're going to go, if that's what they do for worship, I'm out of here because I don't want any part of that. And even imagine, let's take it even less extreme. What if each of them was playing the same song but at a different tempo? I'm going to go fast. You're going to go slow. I'm going to go medium. And they're doing it. Drums are because drummers like to go fast, all right? They're going fast. Y'all like that drumming skill? Greg's just up here strumming slow, just doing his thing. And Sabrina's over there playing at the right tempo. What would it sound like? You know what makes that group so special is they don't do their own thing, they do their part. You know what happens when we say, you know what, it's not about me. It's not about me. It's not about me having the perfect government or the perfect boss or the perfect teacher or the perfect parents. It's about you, God. So God, show me my part to play. And sometimes my part to play is to honor God even when it's not easy. Even when the government passes laws that I look at and go, that is the dumbest law I've ever heard of. Or they tax me on something that I go, why in the world are you taking more of my money? Or a boss goes, hey, I need you to do this. And you go, do you know how much I've done and you expect me to do more? Or a teacher says, hey, we got a surprise test today. And you're like, that's not fair. What if instead of just going, that's not right, and God, why, and bucking up and pushing back, we said, okay, God, how can I honor you? By living a life of honor towards those who are in authority, right? Because that's really what Peter is telling us. He's telling us to look at your government and look at your boss and look at your parents and look at your teachers. And he's acknowledging that some are great and some are not. And I think Peter would have fit really well in Texas because Peter's not a rule follower, is he? I mean, look at him in the Gospels. He didn't like following the rules. And most of us don't either. But Peter comes to this place where he says, God, I want to honor those in authority. I want to honor them. Doesn't mean I'm always going to do everything they say, because sometimes there's a higher purpose that God has for us, right? And there are times, examples in the Bible, and I think examples in history where Christians have decided, you know what, I'm not gonna follow. Look, if our government says I can't worship Jesus, guess what? I'm gonna worship Jesus because I serve something higher. Ultimately, I follow Him, and so ultimately, my biggest concern is what does God want? But part of what God wants, right? And He said it. This is the will of God. Part of it is that if I possibly can, I'm going to honor those in authority. So I want to give you 3 questions that you're not going to like. And I don't want to say I don't care. I care because I pray about it. But I think if we'll take a moment and think about these 3 questions, it might just change not just our lives, but our ability to make a difference in this world. And the first one is, do you build up or do you tear down? I'm talking about with your words. I'm talking about with your attitudes. I'm talking about with who you listen to. I'm talking about what you post on social media. If we were to look at, if you were to be really honest, is your life a life that builds up those in authority, or do you tear down? Do you look for everything that they do wrong and highlight it? Do you attack every flaw that they have? Do you hope they fail? You sort of get a little happy when they mess up. Because I don't agree with them, so look at it, told you, and get excited when they fail. Or do we build up those around us who are in authority? Here's what I want to challenge some of you to do. Okay, you ready? Get ready. For 1 month, don't say anything negative about any authority in this world. For 1 month. It won't, I promise, you won't die. I promise you won't. I'm serious, I promise. Not from that. Something else may kill you, but not that. But what if for 1 month we didn't say anything negative about our government? And I got lots to say. You know me. If you know me, if you've had dinner with me, I've got lots to say. What if for 1 month we didn't say anything negative about our government? What if for 1 month you did not say a negative word about your boss? What if for 1 month you didn't say anything negative about the teachers that you have or that your kids have? For just 1 month. Just like 1 month. We didn't say anything negative. I'm not even getting to the build-up part. I'm just trying to get us to stop tearing down. And what if for a month we said we're not going to tear down anyone in authority because we trust God put him there and he knew what he was doing, and we want to have an ability to tell them about Jesus. So God, let me have enough witness at the end of the day that I could tell them about you, so I'm not going to tear down. I'm only going to build up. Your mom probably said something like, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. You know, that came from the Bible, right? And maybe we ought to put that into practice here with those in authority. Do I build up or do I tear down? The second question I want you to ask yourself is, do you help carry their burden or do you add to it? Are you making life easier for those in authority over you, or are you making it more difficult? And I really want us to think about it, because this is a hard truth for us to process through, because, man, when we look around, your tendency is to go, man, Stephen, do you understand everything they're doing to me? You understand how my boss treats me, and now you want me to make their life easier? You want me to carry their burden? No, that's not fair. That's not right. All they do is hurt me. Aren't you glad Jesus didn't treat you that way? Aren't you glad Jesus didn't say, you know what, Stephen, you messed up, you solved your own problems, you figured out. No, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords lowered himself to below me. It's what he says, to serve me, to take my burden, a burden I could not carry, and did for me what I could not do for myself. What would it look like if we said, God, help me carry the burden? Let me give you a practical thing. What if you did something to help your boss and didn't take any credit for it? I'm just going to do, I know this is hard for them. I know they struggle with it. I know they got a lot. So I'm going to do something to make their life easier, and I'm not going to take any credit. Usually when we do this, what do? Hey boss, you know what I just did for you? Like you tell all your coworkers, man, I just really sacrificed for my boss this week. What if we stopped that and just said, you know what? How can I help carry the burden of someone who's in authority? And then finally, do you reflect selfishness or godliness? If those in authority over you, if those that you work with, if those that you post on your little chat rooms, do they look at you and go, you know what? All I care about is myself and how your decision, how the government, how my bosses, how my teachers, how my parents' decisions affect me. Do they see the selfish that it's all about me? Or do they see someone who lives like Jesus, is godly? And if there's ever an example of sacrifice, his name was Jesus. Do those that are in authority see us living that sacrificial kind of life? Guys, I am convinced that we want to be in charge because we think we know better. also know that what God says, if you want to find greatness in this world, it's not found in you achieving what this world calls greatness. It's found when you submit and when you serve and when you honor and when you're positive and when you're helpful. And by the way, God says the greatest leaders aren't the most powerful, they're the greatest servants. So let's change the way we view those who are in authority. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not saying you have to do everything they say. If they tell you to dishonor God, don't do it. I'm saying, do you have the courage? Listen, I'm asking, do you have the courage to honor those in leadership? Because we trust God and because our witness matters. So let us this week build up, not tear down. Let us this week remove burdens, not add to them. And let us not be selfish, but be godly, so that the world can see Jesus in us and through us.